Lara says kitty.
My intent is not actually to say much, Genevieve, but if you run into a problem, I'm here.
Thank you.
Right now, just so you know what's
Dreamsphere
going
moves to
on,
listen better.
Sathya is sending some reminders to our Fantasy Fair fans groups so that people know we are about to get started with our epic interview of the amazing Genevieve Cogman.
Oh, flattery. Thank you.
Muse says Jen for later. Store this somewhere youtube.com.
Always
link.
here for the fangirling.
Oh, thank you.
We have got someone filming.
Okay.
I think we may have two people filming. Muse, are you taking us? Are you streaming us?
Muse nods.
Okay, good. Can you tell me which channel you're streaming on? And then I can push it out to a couple of other people.
Dreamsphere says it's in local.
Ah, right, yeah. Seeing it, Muse, sorry.
Muse says I just gave the link youtube.com link.
Taking a note of this.
Muse know who the other might be recording though. Lara says, may I post that link to Blue Sky? Muse says, I don't mind. ASL Long Blue Sky has no issues with second live streams / recordings. Intertosh. Janaya says, oops, hope I didn't land on anyone.
Okay, well, thank you everyone,
Beth says,
and
H.I. Janaya.
welcome to this very special talk with our guest of honor for this year,
Janaya
Genevieve
says, Hi,
Cogman,
Beth.
the author of 2 brilliant series of
Dreamsphere
books.
says, yay.
The first is The Invisible Library, which I know is much loved by librarians in Second Life. And the second is The Scarlet Revolution, which is set during the French Revolution and is a very interesting mashup of the Scarlet Pimpernel novels of Baroness Orczy and the and vampire fiction, so that you have the French aristocrats, many of them, and the English aristocrats, many of them too, being vampires. So let's make a start. I think a few people have come in as a result of the notices, and we'll probably get a few more with green dot enthusiasm joining us. But let's make a start. Genevieve, welcome, and thank you so much for doing this. We really are very grateful for you coming in and doing this for us.
Well, thank you for the very kind invitation.
Yes.
I'm honoured to be here, and thank you for the beautiful avatar and clothing.
It's our pleasure. Gwen had a lot of fun with it.
Well, it's lovely.
So, Genevieve, as you are an English-based
Janaya says,
writer,
laughing out loud,
how
Gwen has
far
good
do you
taste.
think you've been influenced by that in your books?
Fire says indeed.
Well, if you mean in terms of setting them in England,
Gwen says, it's my
one
job.
does.
Winky face.
One often wants to write what one knows, but given how
Janaya
the
says
library
Gwen.
series veers all over the world, I would say that gets fairly international. If you mean in terms of writing about things that are important to English people, I don't know, maybe? I mean, I think most writers tend to have something of their personal thoughts and concerns bleed into their writing.
Dreamsphere says,
And
Gwen
when it
has an
comes
amazing
to
eye for brining a person
things,
to life in the
well,
digital world.
I'm not really sure, to be honest.
I was thinking of, I guess, the different values in England and France at the time of the French Revolution.
Well, I could go into quite a lot of detail here because the thing is, the spirit of enlightenment, as some people put it, and bloody revolution, as other people put it, was active in a lot of countries at the time. England was having its own issues with people talking about revolution and new ideas and so on. But the whole French Revolution and the execution of the king was a convenient way for English government to, if you like, tar them all with the same brush. And well, I go a bit more into details about secret police and law and reporting in books 2 and 3 of the Scarlet Revolution series.
Fire says,
I understand that you are a role player, or that you have been. You may not have much time for role playing now. Do you still have time? And
sadly, I don't really. I would like it if I did, but there aren't enough hours in the day.
More pies than fingers, as I always say.
That's a good one, yes. But seriously, what with the day job and the writing and hobbies of mine like sewing and knitting, I just don't have the time and the energy I would like to spend on role-playing as well.
I can see that Gwen will want to have a chat with you about knitting at some point. When you were role-playing, did you like to GM and control the narrative, or did you like to play under a GM and shape things from there?
To be honest, I usually ended up as GM, but I'm not sure whether it was because I actually wanted to be a GM, or because it just ended up that way because I was trying to get everyone else into playing. And I was the one with the book saying, "Come on, let's do In Nomine or Amber or whatever," and everyone else was just going along with it. And I was the one. I ended up being the one who provided the background and some of the background of the story, though working with the players and their own ideas, of course.
Right. So you were actually a story creator.
I suppose you could put it that way, but on the other hand, you could also say that in a good role-playing game, the players were as involved in creating the story as the GM is too. Yes, instigator's a good word for it.
Yes. No game supplies first contact with the players.
Oh, that is so very true.
And how far do you think the need for stories in role-playing games impacted on your own writing?
Interesting question. I'm just trying to think of a good answer to that. Let's see. When you say need, do you mean in the sense of me having to provide the story, or in the sense of... I'm sure it encouraged me to keep on daydreaming, but to be honest, I was a very good daydreamer in any case. In the sense that I I think one thing that role-playing did give me and having to GM did give me was in a sense of having to make the background reasonable. I am sure you all know how loud players can be if they think a plot twist is unfair or unreasonable or unjustified, or but there is no reason why the guards should be arriving at this point. And so it did help me work on providing justifications and reasonable background, so these days when I put a character in trouble, I can reasonably say that it was only fair that the Revolutionary Guard arrived at that point, and so on.
Yes. So, I think your first published books were role-playing books.
They were, yes, in nomine for the Steve Jackson games, the In Nomine series, which is, well, it's called In Nomine. It's based on the original French role-playing game In Nomine Satanis Magna Veritas, which is a lot darker and a lot more satirical. Then I ended up doing some writing for the Exalted role-playing game for White Wolf, as it was at that point. And also I did the GURPS Vorkosigan adaptation for Steve Jackson Games, which was the adaptation of the Vorkosigan series into a background setting book form to fit with the GURPS system.
I have to say, when I found out about that, I sort of squeed, because I am a huge fan of her Vorkosigan novels. How did you get involved with that, and how is it working with someone else's universe?
You have to be very, very careful, and it did go to Bujold herself to be checked over as well. I mean, I already loved Bujold's writing. A friend had introduced me to it. At that point, well, I started off writing fan stuff for In Nomine, and a friend of mine who was line editor on the line got me to submit some writing for Pyramid, the in-house Steve Jackson Games magazine. And then I ended up getting an offer to help contribute to some of the source books there. And then when they were looking for somebody to write the GURPS Vorkosigan book, I got asked if I was interested. And it involved reading through all the Vorkosigan books as well, in lots of detail, with a pen and paper next to me, making notes about such and such happens on such and such a page. When she says a character says X, or has relations Y, or planets, a detail, and stuff like that.
I can imagine heavily noted versions.
Well, yes.
I have to admit, Mark and Karen, I think, are my favourite characters.
They are wonderful characters. Though I have to admit, these days, my personal favourite is the Penrick series.
Right. I haven't actually read that.
Oh, you should. You really should.
Okay. I promise I will. Okay. So, you turned from writing gaming books to writing novels. Was there an opening for that, or what was your reason for actually moving into novels?
I'd already been trying to write novels. I mean, there are two of mine which have never got anywhere in sense of being published. I still have them somewhere around the place. I would like to think I've improved. A friend of mine from LiveJournal, who saw the current thing I was working on, which was the early version of Invisible Library, encouraged me to finish it and was kind enough to offer me an introduction to her agent, who...
Oh, that's kind.
That was very generous of her. And when the agent had looked at the finished version and then sent it back for edits, I should warn anyone, by the way, who wants to write, there will be lots of editing, and you will not always be correct in thinking that your version is the final version. Anyhow, so a couple of rewrites later, the agent was willing to pick me up, and sort of a while later, I got an offer for the first 3 books, and that was incredible. I mean, I couldn't quite believe it when it happened.
Yes.
But the thing is, since then, I just haven't really had much time and energy to work to be writing anything else.
Yes, I can understand that, because they've pretty much come out annually. Well, they did, because the series is now finished, didn't they?
That's true, but now the Scarlet Revolution is coming out annually.
Yes. And we'll talk about other things when we get to that point in the interview. So, the Invisible Library series was the first, and as you'd been contracted for 3 months, so I was going to ask you, did you always see it as being a series? But as you were contracted for 3 books, then yes, I guess that was what you saw it as.
When I was writing the first book, I saw it as a beginning with the possibility of more. When I got an offer for 3 books, I tried to write books that were more or less self-contained in themselves, but there was a plot arc, if you like, that finished at the end of the 3rd book. And then I got an offer for books 4 and 5, so then again 2 self-contained books with something of a plot arc between them, and then 6 to 8. And at that point I was thinking, I want to tie up some of the plot threads I've been working with. And anyone who's read up to book 8 will know who I'm talking about too. So at that point I was trying to again make sure each book could be read on its own, though as the series went on you did need to have more background information about what was happening. But also
Your voice is cut out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
You're back. Yes, hear you now.
Oh, good.
Right. So, sorry. Yes, you were talking about. You were talking about the how you were writing the series and seeing it as a series.
Yes,
So
I did
by
see it
the
as an
time
ongoing series.
Yes, by the time you got to end of book 8, you say, I think we dropped at that point.
I felt that by the time we got to the end of book 8, I wanted to tie off some of the ongoing plot threads. And so I did close some plot avenues, but I would like to think some of the other ideas are still ongoing and open. If I ever do come back to it, I have some ideas what I could do with it, though probably not in the immediate future, I'm afraid.
Have you ever, do you encourage or discourage fan fiction writing for it?
I am incredibly flattered that people want to write fan fiction for it. However, it would be inappropriate for me ever to look at the fan fiction, because if I was ever to write something which crossed over with the territory of the fan fiction, then the fan writer could lift their hand and say, "That was my idea, you stole it." And it is very hard to prove that you didn't do something, as Miles Vorkosigan can testify from Setagandalf.
Yes.
So the only thing I can do to avoid trouble is to be able to say, hand on heart, I have not read that fan fiction. So while I can't think of a better compliment to know that people want to play with my characters, but at the same time, I'm afraid you'll have to do it without me reading them. Sorry, guys.
Right. This is how Goodreads describes the first book, and those of you who haven't read it yet, tell me if this description doesn't whet your appetite. Irene is a professional spy for the mysterious library which harvests fiction from different realities, and along with her enigmatic assistant Kai, she's posted to an alternative London. Their mission, to retrieve a dangerous book. But when they arrive, it's already been stolen. London's underground factions seem prepared to fight to the very death to find her book. Adding to the jeopardy, the world is chaos infested. The laws of nature are bent to allow supernatural creatures and unpredictable magic. Irene's new assistant is also hiding secrets of his own. Soon she's up to her eyebrows in a heady mixture of danger, clues, and secret societies. Yet failure is not an option. The nature of reality itself is at stake. There. You find that a fair summation of Volume 1?
I think it's a nicely teased summation. I have to say that writing blurbs is not one of my strengths, so I'm very pleased when my publishers can come up with something as tasty as that.
Yes. You see, Dreamsphere has just said, you had me at library, and the rest was just a tease into the story.
Thank you very much.
So let's talk a little about the series. In your novels, there are two opposing forces, the dragons and the elves, or rather the fae. And between them, in addition to the common mass of humanity, are the librarians. Can you tell us a little about this?
Well, the idea, which goes all the way back to Michael Moorcock and similar, is that on the one side you've got the forces of order, on the other end you've got the forces of chaos, and you've got humanity in the middle. On a more personal to me note, the dragons, if you like, in the raw form they represent brute nature, brute reality, a world where multiple stormtroopers shooting their guns will hit the hero, where the laws of nature are all there is. On the other end, you've got the Fae, who are self-involved, who, as I think someone said, always consider themselves to be the main character of the story, who deliberately fall into fictional attitudes and try to personify their own favourite character. And in a Robin Hood story, Robin Hood would fight off 20 of the Cheris men before gaily swinging off into the sunset.
Yes, definitely. They're very much the heroes of their own lives.
Yes.
And then, in addition to these two powerful forces, you have the librarians acquiring books across the multiverse. To be fair, this type of acquisition lies at the heart of many of the great museums of the West. Was that part of your inspiration for the librarians?
Well, certainly the excuse of "we stole it for the greater good" comes from, as you say, many of the great museums of the West. The librarian's position is that by acquiring unique works of fiction from separate worlds, they help to serve as a middle balance to keep everything linked and in balance and organised, and sort of neither side getting the upper hand. The fact that most librarians have their own private stashes of their own personal favourite fiction is quite beside the point. I mean, all three sides would say that their own perspective is the best of them all, and that they are the ones working for the greater good. And the librarians don't tend to think that much about some of the background details. There may possibly be a reason for this, as some of you who've read later books will know. But they are generally consider themselves to be the good guys, who just happen to be going round stealing unique books from different worlds. And whether it's... Well, the thing is, the later books in the series do give some more background here, but I don't want to go spoiling it all for new readers.
Right. And I think that, yes, I mean, I think to be fair to the librarians, they will buy the books if that's an option.
Oh yes, they're prepared to buy them, prepared to copy them, because they don't actually require the original physical book, they just require the story. So Irene spent at least one mission for a few months sneaking in by night to copy the book out from where it's being kept, and went home with a copy of it, and she was quite happy to do that. I'm not saying that all librarians are quite as ethical or careful as she is, though.
Are we talking real librarians in real life or librarians in your novels?
Oh, I'm sure that all librarians in real life are very ethical and so on. I wouldn't dare say otherwise. But I'm sure that some librarians in the books are a bit more pragmatic, cold-blooded, see their needs as a priority, and are prepared to sacrifice other things and people to get to them.
Yes, that comes across too. Now, the librarians have the language, and I want to emphasize that that's a capital L, the language, and it's the source of their power, really. Can you explain about that?
Well, this particular idea goes right back to all the various bits of fiction and folklore about true names, or Ursula Le Guin in her Earthsea series, where a wizard has to be able to name things by its true name in order to compel it and use it or change it, or all the fairy stories where somebody's true name is really important. Or, well, I'm sure you can think of plenty of other ideas. I'm a long way from being the first writer to use this as an idea. But yes, the librarians have to learn the language. They can't just give it to them. They have to learn it and any other languages they want to use. Most librarians are polyglots, if only so they can operate in different countries and read books and not get fobbed off with a fake copy or something.
Yes, that would be very unfortunate. But yes, I mean, if you're in, say, Germany, you would have to use a German form of the language, do you mean?
No, I apologise, that wasn't quite right. What I meant is the language is always heard, if it's spoken, it's heard by people in their native language. It is an entire thing on itself. It has its own vocabulary, which is regularly updated, and librarians do have to keep up to date with it. But if Irene were sent to Germany to operate there undercover, if she couldn't speak German, could only speak English, it would be very, very obvious. So, librarians who are sent on missions to particular countries or particular areas, they do try normally to find someone for the job who knows the local language and won't stand out too obviously. Of course, sometimes things just happen, and that nobody's available who speaks Finnish, and the person sent to Finland will just have to cope. That's life.
Yes. I once taught a Japanese student who said that her father went into the Japanese diplomatic service, at which point he had a choice of specializing in one of two languages, and one was Chinese and the other was English, and he chose Chinese because it was closer to Japanese and he thought it'd be easier. And then every single posting he had in his career took him to an English-speaking country.
Oh.
So, yeah. It doesn't just happen with us. So, I love the way that the language is constantly evolving and changing. That's a real language right there. But using the language can cause problems. What can cause the language to go wrong? Because these are some of the funniest points in the books.
Thank you. Well, you have to be very precise what you say in the language. If I were Irene and could say at this point where I'm sitting, stones rise, then everything made in this room, which is stone, would hear me and might try and rise up. And that could possibly be bad. I mean, if I wanted to say, I'm just trying to find something convenient to use as an example. So as I said, sofa, slide across the floor, then both the sofas present might hear me. Well, there's only one sofa here, isn't there? Okay, so the one sofa here, within earshot, would go sliding across the floor. Or I might say bookcases collapse, at which point every bookcase within earshot would collapse, which would be very dramatic. And there's also the very
We've
convenient...
got another drop.
Oh, bother. How do I know when
You're
it will come?
back.
All right.
Good.
Okay, if I were to say language...
There should be...
Sorry?
I was going to say the green lights will be above your head when you speak.
Right.
That's always the clue.
Yep. And there's the convenient language trick of making other people believe what you're saying, which is when you say to somebody in the language, you perceive that so-and-so, like you perceive I am an Imperial stormtrooper. And at which point they will go, very good, carry on, sir. The only problem with it is you can never be sure how long it will last.
Right.
It might last, and people will remember what happened when it wears off. So it might last till you are several corridors away, or it might wear off just as you're leaving the room, in which point you will probably leave the room very fast indeed.
Right. So, can you tell us something about the world building, or should I say the worlds building in the books? Did you start out with a plan as to how it would all be, or did it come gradually?
I started out with some parts planned. The rest of it I worked out as it went along, either to fit the needs of what I was doing, or in order to support the plot. I mean, some bits I've worked out, I sort of got to the end of the book and then I went back and refined them.
Right. That's kind of almost going to what Lois McMaster's Bajol said, you know, about the author reserves the right to have a better idea.
Oh, I love that saying. That's one of my favourites, but it's so absolutely true.
Yes.
I mean, besides, if I were to write a plot outline now and finish writing the book a year later, what are the odds that I would have had no better ideas in the whole year between then and now?
Exactly. Yes.
When I was originally writing Invisible Library, I had the basic idea of gaslight London, pseudo-Victorian with a bit more steampunk. And then various other bits as I was writing it came along, like the confusion at Covent Garden, the Zeppelins. I put Zeppelins in at the beginning, and then I ended up having a Zeppelin fight and chase part later on in the book, because I had worked out, okay, so somewhere between going to the museum and they have to have a attempt to stop them on the way, and ended up being this Zeppelin fight, but it could have been something else.
Right. Now, I once spoke with Michelle Sagara, who wrote the Chronicles of Elantia, and she told me how she started without world building in describing the city that's at the core of the books, and ended up hoping desperately that someone, you know, a fan, would draw a map so she could keep it clear in her head. Did you ever have that problem?
Not personally. The map, in most cases where I've been looking at layout, if you like, I've gone back to the real world for the layout. Like in a scene set in Alexandra Palace, I was looking up online for maps of the layout at that point in time. Or when I was sort of seen in Paris, and I was able to look at a map of Paris at that point. And in certain cases when it didn't quite fit what I wanted, I just waved my hand and said alternate history.
Yeah, so it's an alternate world. Things may have been built differently there.
Yes, I think in my books I have not created any universals, any particular location where it's been all my own work and where I've wanted to create a map of it. If I had done it, the situation would be different probably.
Yes. Now, I don't want to give away too many spoilers for the books, as you'll all find a book table at the back of the room with all of Genevieve's published books. So just click on a book and you'll have access to a link that will take you where you can purchase that book in electronic format. Dorney Davio is the curator of the book table, and she's done a wonderful job in getting them all together. So actually, just like at a real literary festival, you could buy your books here and take them away with you, which is pretty neat, I think. And that's all thanks to Dorney. However, sadly, there is no way we can have a signing session. Even though we have the author virtually here with us, I'm afraid she will not be signing any books.
I'm so sorry.
However, Genevieve, are there any spoilers that you want to reveal about the books?
About the library series, the Scarlet Revolution series, or what happens next?
No, I was thinking at this point of the Invisible Library, because we're going to come on to Scarlet Revolution in just a second.
Well, I can't think of... I wouldn't want to give away spoilers if you haven't got there yet. So...
True. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what I can say there, except that I did have, as I said, I've got some ideas about what might happen next. But... Well, then again, you can always write fanfic.
Yeah, just buy it. Yeah. Okay. I have to say, and I'm going to say this before we leave the subject of the Invisible Library, much as I like the intrepid and intelligent heroine, one of my favourite characters is Vale, the 15th Duke of Liverpool, who is also a private detective with a strong resemblance to someone.
I did enjoy writing him. Then again, my first real reading when I sort of got out of The Hobbit was The Lord of the Rings on one hand and Sherlock Holmes on the other. I did work out more detail on Vale's background, like, how he's split with most of his family. His younger brother is... Well, there's something dubious about him, but I never quite worked out what. His older sister, whose name is Columbine, is a sort of Mycroft analogue, and works in the British Secret Service, and has computer jacks on her wrists and the back of her neck, which allow her to do computer-related things. She's quite large and somewhat overpowering in person, but she never actually really made it into the story, apart from casual reference.
Right.
Or stuff like how in his family the boys tend to get named after animals and birds, and the girls get named after flowers. Background stuff like that.
Yes.
But I did almost put Columbine into, I think it was somewhere in book 6. But the thing is, the book was already mostly full of advanced at that point. And my editor says, wouldn't it make more sense to give the part in the narrative to Inspector Singh, who's already showed up several times in the book? And I had to say, yes, you're right. So she never made it in. I'm sorry, Columbine. Someday.
Someday, yes. Perhaps a Christmas short story for her.
Could be.
Okay. Let's move on now and talk about your second series, The Scarlet Revolution, which is set in a different version of Earth, where the aristocrats of the Ancient regime are quite literally, as opposed to allegorically, vampires. In fact, the series could be described, and I have described it, as a mashup between the Scarlet Pimpernel novels of Baroness Orczy and vampires, because you get Sir Percy Blakeney as a character and his little group who rescue people from the guillotine in the novel.
Yup, they seek him here, they seek him there. Those Frenches seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven? Is he in hell? That dimmed, elusive Pimpernel.
Yes, and that is so wonderful because that gives you the 3 book titles.
Thank you for noticing. You're absolutely correct. Yes, and I've always been fond of the Scarlet Pimpernel books. I first read them when I was quite young, at the age when I took them very uncritically, if you like. I just swallowed them down and enjoyed the film, and then fenced in the back garden with a blackcurrant canes, ha, my dear Chauvelin, the pleasure is all mine.
Yes, yes, that's a wonderful relationship between Sir Percy and Chauvelin.
I will say that when I got a bit older and I read them a bit more critically, and I actually started thinking about them as opposed to just absorbing them, I ended up finding either areas where I disagreed, or I would have done that differently, or where I found where it was something that was, if you like, I think the tactful phrase is of its time, isn't it?
Yes.
And I noted that while Orczy did put some good guys on the French side and some bad guys on the English side, it was fairly definite that, well, as you say, of its time, but there was still a lot of good stuff there, and I still respect and enjoy it.
Here's how Goodreads describes the trilogy. Revolution is a bloodthirsty business, especially when vampires are involved. It is 1793 and the French Revolution is in full swing. Vampires, usually rich and aristocratic, have slaked the guillotine's thirst in large numbers. The mysterious Scarlet Pimpernel, a disguised British noble, and his league are heroically rescuing dozens of aristocrats from execution, both humans and vampires, and soon they will have an ace up their sleeve, Eleanor Dalton. Eleanor is working as a housemaid on the estate of a vampire baroness. Her highest aspiration is to one day become a modiste, but when the baroness hosts a mysterious noble and his wife, they tell Eleanor she is a spitting image of a French aristocrat, and they convince her to journey to France with them to aid them in a daring scheme. Soon Eleanor finds herself in Paris and swept up in magic and intrigue and chaos beyond her wildest dreams. But there's more to fear than the ardent revolutionaries, for Eleanor stumbles across a centuries-old war between vampires and their fiercest enemy, and they're out for blood. So, first of all, what gave you the idea for the combination of two different genres, swashbuckling heroic adventure and the decadent vampire fiction?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I was writing down lists of ideas and things I enjoyed, and I think for some reason I drew a line between Scarlet Pimpernel and vampires, and then I started working from there. And when my background research showed that one of the epithets thrown at the aristocrats was sanguinocrats, that just seemed too good not to use, really.
Yes.
And then I started working out, saying to myself, what is actually the story here? And I started off with a character who gets drawn into the League's work. And I wanted someone who wasn't a trained spy like Irene. I was looking for a change of idea. And one of the things, and I wanted to give her, if you like, some traditional skills. So, and needlework, embroidering, sewing was something that I could see her doing. And it also, as those who've read the books will know, she tends to look at a lot of things around her with sewing metaphors. And I made a note, oh yes, so she looks like another character, and went from there, basically.
It's very effective, I think. It also, actually, I think the early working as a servant to the Lady of Basing was one of the most chilling things I've read. because she's working as a servant, and she gives her blood to her vampiric mistress, and it's you describe the kind of elaborate ritual that goes into preparing her blood for her mistress to drink, and it is so exploitative and so dark, I found.
That's a really good term for it, exploitative, because, well, the vampires who are basically vampires do not compose the entire aristocracy, but there are vampires among the aristocrats in most of the European nations at this point, and the sensible ones want to keep things the way they are, basically. They want to keep their livestock, their menials, their servants, healthy and happy, at least the sensible ones do, because that way they can have a continued blood supply, the servants are happy, there's none of that revolution nonsense. And yes, as somebody has said, she's been sheltered, her education has been controlled. But then, to be fair, a young woman in the 1790s is not working on an estate in the country, is not going to have a very wide education. And in any case, a lot of them would just live their lives in small and die quietly in probably the same town they grew up in. But yes, I like to think she's not stupid, she's intelligent. She's never had that much chance to use her intelligence or to develop. And once the world starts exposing her to new information, revolutionary ideas, she starts developing her own theories.
Alva, you do, and you can get them at the book table at the back of the room. Her books are wonderful, yes.
Thank you. I would blush if I could.
People are coming in and going, oh, I've got to get these.
I mean, part of the reason things have gone wrong in France, well, as the vampires will put it, things have gone wrong, quote unquote, in France, is that the aristocracy oppressed the peasants with too heavy a hand. You've got to let them think they have things under control, that they run their own lives, that they stay healthy, they take plenty of exercise, get a good diet. Happy, unthinking, well, not quite unthinking, but thinking the way you want them to think. Who owns the newspapers? And while vampires can't hold positions in government, perhaps they own land, they have money. I will admit, by the way, that yes, when it comes to role-playing games, I have read the background of Vampire the Masquerade and Ars Magica and so on. So I know all sorts of ways that vampires can influence the world around them without necessarily being the ones obviously in power.
I think yes, that works very well. I just love the whole concept of the aristocrats as literal bloodsuckers of the lower classes.
Well, that does seem to resonate a lot with readers for some reason. I can't think why.
Well, to me it certainly seems a great way to play with our sympathies, because in the original Scarlet Pimpernel novels, it's the aristocrats who need to be rescued from the bloodthirsty revolutionaries. However, here you're slanting perspectives from the word go. I love it.
Thank you.
Were the ambiguities of the historical period an important part of this for you?
Absolutely. I'm a long way from being a qualified historian on the subject, though I've had to read a certain amount. And put it this way, there were reasons there was a French Revolution. It did not just happen out of thin air. And there was the revolutionary spirit, the idea of enlightenment, the idea of more rights for everybody, the idea of increased knowledge, the fact that the American Revolution, America, those of you who've seen Hamilton will remember a certain line about King Louis being super dead. that's him, that's King Louis. While Hamilton is going on in America, these things are happening over in England and France. Other countries are sticking their fingers in. Italy, Austria, Germany, everyone's taking an interest in what's going on. And a lot of governments are pointing their fingers at France and saying, this Enlightenment thing is a bad idea because it makes people rise up and cut their king's head off.
Mm.
They are trying to associate the whole idea of Enlightenment with armed revolution, hunger, famine, trials, show trials, and so on. It's a lot more complicated than I can really go into, but yes, the idea that there are multiple perspectives and that there are elements on both sides who have reasons to say this should not be happening or this should be happening.
Has your reading for this included Hilary Mantel's A Place of Greater Safety?
No, I'm afraid not. I don't know that one.
Oh, her Wolf Hall ones have kind of taken over, but she wrote A Place of Greater Safety, all about the French Revolution.
Oh.
And it focuses on Robespierre, Desmoulins, and Danton.
I will have to look that up. Thank you.
It's a wonderful read.
Excellent.
So have you long been interested in the French Revolution?
I've not always been deeply interested in it. I mean, ever since I first read the Pimpernel books and first saw, I think it was Leslie Howard movie, I've known about it, and I've maybe known a little more about it than other people, than your average, if you like, man on the Clapham omnibus.
Yes.
To use an old quote. But I didn't really start looking into it in detail till I actually started reading up on research for it. And, well, things like the Law of 22 Prairial and the Great Terror and the Drownings and other entertaining things. And I'd heard about Robespierre's supreme being idea, but I didn't really know about it till I actually started reading up on this. Though it only really gets referred to as a thrown-in rather than actually have a serious role in the plot. Though anybody who knows about the Law of 22 Prairial and is reading Book 2 with an eye on the date will notice certain things happening and will realise why Chauvelin advises Eleanor to get out of Paris as fast as possible.
Yes. When it was like the 1989, when it was the bicentennial of the French Revolution, I did quite a bit of reading around it then, and the Hilary Mantel and Simon Schama's account I found absolutely fascinating.
Right, I'll have to check it out.
Right. One thing I found fascinating about this, and very true to life, is that the characters in the Scarlet Revolution shift. So, I mean, characters with secrets to discover and or reveal are one thing. They're quite a common fictional trope, and a jolly good one. Just because something is a trope, it's not a bad thing. But the characters, not just our point of view characters, growing and changing is rarer. And yours do. Was that important to you within the story?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly the protagonist has to grow and change, but yes, I felt everyone around her should be, well, not everyone, but a lot of the people around her have their own growing to do. Charles, for instance, the young aristocrat who's part of the League, learns things from being exposed to her, and Chauvelin's daughter, Fleurette, develops her own political consciousness. She's actually a character from the original books, though I've run with her a bit. Her original characteristics were very nice, very sweet, a bit too good to be true, honest to a fault, and so on. So I played with that a bit, but I enjoyed working with her. She was a great character to write. But yes, I do feel that it would be unrealistic for the protagonist to be the only one in the story who develops and changes at all. Either, I mean, not everybody, but certainly the main characters ought to show some signs of, if she's changed from exposure to them, they might change from exposure to her.
Mm.
And of course, if you're messing up with that, with magic and other things, then that would affect them as well. I found it quite interesting to explore everyone's different perspective on when certain weird things start happening, how they try to explain it, because it all goes back a bit to their own personal character as to how they try to explain what's happening and why and what sort of explanation they give. Sorry, I'm being careful here so as not to give too many spoilers.
Yes, but yes, it's fascinating, I think, and another reason why the books are so readable, I think.
Thank you.
Right, I was going to wrap up. Well, first of all, the third volume, the end of the trilogy, the Scarlet Revolution trilogy, is coming out on May the 22nd.
Yup, damned.
Yeah, damned elusive Pimpernel.
I did think about calling it Demmed, but I thought it would be too difficult to explain as a title.
So that's coming out very shortly, so you can all get hold of it. You can pre-order it on Amazon, in fact. But you have something in the pipeline to come after the Scarlet Revolution series. Can you tell us anything about that?
Absolutely. I would be delighted. It's a new trilogy, and it's been described as Centrinians meets demon summoning. This is Centrinians trying to go back to the original drawings by Searle.
Yes.
While the recent movies and, well, the older movies are all entertaining and good, I just want to get back to the gleeful lethality and darkness of some of the earlier cartoons, a bit like the Addams Family.
Yes.
And the protagonist is a hapless Latin teacher who's just got a job there, for various reasons is a bit desperate, and then things start getting interesting.
This just sounds wonderful. How can I ask how many volumes you're anticipating?
I've signed up for 3, and the plot, as I've planned it, does sort of encompassed in 3 books. I mean, if they all do fantastically well, then maybe the publishers will come back to me and say, write some more. So, just dropping a hint here. But we'll see how it goes.
Yes. And when do you expect the first one to be out?
Probably, well, I'm handing in the first draft to the publishers in October this year. So It's probably not going to be till around May or more next year, at a guess. I don't know. Things happen. The publishing world is always a bit in flux, and it might need lots of rewrites. You don't necessarily get there. So, but I would say probably somewhere in the first half of next year with a bit of luck.
We will look out for it. And we'll make sure that it's on the book table, won't we, Dorney, for next year?
I like that. Horror and hockey sticks. Yes. Excellent.
Yes. And I saw you'd referred to P.G. Woodhouse as well, which makes my heart glow.
The protagonist, I want her to be a bit clueless in the Bertie Wooster way.
Yes.
Not stupid, but sometimes a bit slow to notice things. Like, yes, the girls are happily playing on the field outside. Why are they suddenly trying to climb through the windows, screaming and waving their hockey sticks? Or the ongoing thing about so-and-so tried to burn the school down. Yes, dear, everyone tries to burn the school down.
Yes, it also sounds like shades of that wonderful film with Margaret Rutherford and Alistair Sim, The Happiest Days of Your Life.
Oh, is that the one where the girls' school gets billeted on the boys' school
Yes,
during...
yes,
Yes,
that's right.
yes.
Yes.
Classic.
Yes, all of them playing up to their characters brilliantly.
It's set about 20 years in the past. I'm fiddling things a bit because, to be honest, it would be a bit hard to tell this story in the years of social media. So I'm kicking it back about 20 years to give myself more room to work.
That sounds sensible. Okay, well, I was just going to end up with a general question. A couple of general questions. Which writers would you regard as being influential on your work?
I could try and give you a list, but the odds are I'll forget somebody. But, you know, for a start, Bujold, Tolkien, Arthur Conan Doyle, Edmund Crispin, Barbara Hambley.
Sorry.
Sorry?
Sorry.
Is there another
Edmund
Gervais
Crispin.
fan there?
No, yes, total. The Moving Toy Shop is just wonderful.
That was the first one of his I ever read. It was in the boarding school library, and I loved it.
Yeah.
But yes, Edmund Crispin, John Dixon Carr. I have a load of Golden Age crime fiction on the shelf. I'm sure there's more. Diane. I've said Barbara Hambley, haven't I?
Yes.
And Georgette Heyer. I have a load of Georgette Heyer. So those people who spot a bit of Georgette Heyer in the Pimpernel books would not be wrong in spotting it. And
Yes,
oh yes,
too.
UK Chesterton. Well, there's a few of them, but I could go on for ages, honestly.
You've hit several of my favourites. I mean, Gervais Fenn is kind of, Edmund Crispin is slightly less well known than the others, I think.
But he's such an excellent writer.
So wonderful, yes. I love the bit in the Glimpses of the Moon where he looks into, Fenn looks into a mirror and gives a description of himself. And he says, well, he's still looking good. At this rate, he might live long enough to see a time when authors don't make their characters look into mirrors to give the self-description.
Or how about in the Moving Toy Shop where he goes, let's go left, this book's being published by Galantz.
Yes.
But yes, classic author. And I think the thing is, most authors pick up at least a bit from a lot of the books they read. So it's very hard to say so-and-so is my primary inspiration, because you'll never know when you'll turn over something you've written and then go, oh, wait a moment, I recognise this turn of phrase or this idea or this choice of words.
Yes. Yes. So, is there a particular fantasy series or writer that you adore and would recommend?
To be honest, there are so many these days that it's difficult to recommend any single one. There's Pratchett, of course. Who doesn't love their Pratchett? There's Tolkien. There's Barbara Hambley. There's Bujold. Just turning to have a look at the bookcase. There's Robin McKinley. There's Michael Scott Rowan.
Yes.
I'm currently in the middle of The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is very, very good indeed. And I love the Astræont series by Melissa Scott. In fact, I love pretty much all Melissa Scott's work. And I'm probably going to think of half a dozen people after this who I should have mentioned and haven't. But there's so much good stuff out there at the moment. It's wonderful. Honestly, I'm over 50 years old. there is so much good stuff out. Let us be grateful for it.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, well, you are back with us on Monday at 2 p.m. again.
2 p.m.
And yes, well, that's what it is in Second Life, but it's 10 p.m. for us in the UK.
Oh, phew, I was panicking for a moment there.
Yes, you'll be back at 10 p.m. for us on Monday, and it will be followed by a Gothic ball, which will either be at the back of the hall, or if we get lots and lots of people, we'll go outside and dance on the beach. It's not really appropriate for the Scarlet Revolution, but yeah, wear your best baroque if you can.
Will do.
Okay. And yes, we've tried to tempt you with a wonderful ball dress.
I have seen it as absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Genevieve, thank you so much for coming today. As you can see, you've got quite a few fans here, and you've got, I would say, quite a few potential fans as well here. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. And I would like to remind everyone that we are, of course, doing this in support of Relay for Life. And you will find kiosks by the entrance. There are a couple of kiosks. So if you could pop a few lindens into the kiosks, that would be wonderful. So Genevieve, thank you so much. Audience, thank you so much. Oh, I forgot to ask quickly, do we have any questions? Because Gwen has been taking down questions. Do we have any questions?
I can't hear anything if they're being...
No. Gwen, have you put your mic on?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, good. Sorry. Sorry about that. My note card has fallen aside. Let me grab it.
Hasty rummaging going on here.
And thank you, by the way, everyone. I'm very flattered that you came to listen. I'm very flattered you've been invited here. I hope you've enjoyed the talk, and I hope you enjoy my books if you read them.
I can't imagine anybody not enjoying them. We have a question from Aquarius who'd like to know if your Invisible Library series was the basis of the television show.
Do you mean the Librarians series?
Yes, I think so.
No, nothing at all to do with it, I'm afraid. Totally independent.
That's what I thought. Dreamsphere has a duple question. She'd like to know if you use test readers to help with the editing process that are able to help with historical details.
I have beta readers, but I don't have specific test historical readers, no. But then again, part of the copy editing job at the publisher's end is to look for historical issues or historical problems and spot them, like, this street did not exist at this point, or this location is wrong or whatever, to which I may either fix it or I may wave my hand to go alternate world.
Thank you. Dream's next question is, in your story with fantasy creatures, do you find you create your own idea of how you see them, or do you tend to refer back to past gaming systems ideas of creatures like elvenkind or vampires?
I have, in the cases where I've written about them, I've been working from my own perspective, but it may well have been at least somewhat influenced by previous reading or previous art.
Thank you for that.
Apologies if you heard that, I just had to cough.
Thank you for that. And just to round us off from Donnie, is there a book? This is a great last question, Donnie. Thank you. Is there a book you'd love to write which would be totally different from your current books?
Now that you mention it, there is a vague idea I've got, but I would need to do a load more work before presenting a proposal to my publishers. You all probably know the story about Persephone and Hades and Demeter.
Mm-hmm.
And how these days there's a lot of stuff about Persephone giving her more agency in the story.
Yes.
And often casting Demeter in a bad light. I would like the idea, when you look back at the original story, you've got Demeter setting out to walk the world, disguised as an old mortal woman, making her way across the land looking for her daughter. I think there is a story there where the protagonist is a, middle-aged woman trying to find her daughter, coping with whatever the setting is. That's the thing, I don't know, I would need to work out what the setting is, what the plot is, what if Persephone is the bad guy here, and so on. But the idea of Demeter being the protagonist rather than Persephone is just catching my thoughts recently, but I have no idea what I'll do with it yet.
That does sound fascinating.
I love that as an idea, and I hope it happens. Thank you so much, Genevieve.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the questioners.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, thank you. If you want to see how Second Life Theatre is pulled together to create plays, the Theatre Fest is just starting their meeting now. And they've held it up a bit for us, bless them, because they knew we were having this special talk. So if you would like to go and see how they're progressing with rehearsals for their play and learn about production management in Second Life, I can recommend going over to the theatre, and let me just give you the link so you can hop over there quickly. And I'm sure if you can pop over, it would make Fakey very happy.
Don't forget that if you're into the vampire side of things, tonight's Lit Fest tour at 5 p.m. SLT is Nox Eterna.
Absolutely. We've had quite a few vampires today, or at least horror. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you so much for coming.